Good morning, students. I greet you all and I hope you are staying safe from the coronavirus. As agreed by the school authority and as I recently discussed with your course rep, but agreed on online lecture. So this morning we'll continue with our lecture from where we stopped in the class. And I hope all of us will make use of this opportunity as we continue with our classes online. The course, as you know, is social context of educational planning. When we talk about social context here, we are talking about individuals and persons in the society for whom education is planned. So a lot of variables are considered in the planning of education as it concerns the individual members of the society. I told us earlier in the class that society that we talk about, it's not the trees, it's not the buildings, but it's the individuals. And the education of the individuals in the society brings about development in that society. So that is why education must be planned. And for it to be planned, the social context or the sociological variables that make up that society must be taken into consideration in the planning process. So this morning, the topic we are going to cover is the planning tools in education. The planning tools in education. Take it again. The planning tools in education. When we talk about the social context of educational planning, we want to plan education for the individuals. What are the tools we use in the planning process? What are the tools? What are the instruments? What are the things we use in the planning? So that is what we call the planning tools in the educational planning process. And the tools we are going to consider, which we use in educational planning, they are also called the indicators of educational development. Those things we use as tools are also known as the indicators of educational development. On our educational planning textbook is found on page 165. Page 165. Page 165 of our educational planning textbook. Those tools are known as indicators of educational development. We use them to plan. And they include the following. They include the following. Enrollment ratio. Enrollment ratio. Enrollment ratio. Under enrollment ratio, we have 4 categories. Under enrollment ratio, we have 4 categories. The general enrollment ratio. Under enrollment ratio, we have 4 categories. The general enrollment ratio, age-specific enrollment ratio, level enrollment ratio, and adjustment enrollment ratio. Let me take it again. We have general enrollment ratio, age-specific enrollment ratio, level enrollment ratio, and adjustment enrollment ratio. So what do we even mean by enrollment ratio? What do we mean by enrollment ratio? Enrollment ratio is the number of students. If it's in the secondary school, they are referred to as students. At the primary school level, they are called pupils. So the enrollment ratio is the number of students or pupils of a given age bracket enrolled into a given level of education at a given time in relation to the entire population of the given age bracket in a given area. Let me take that again. Enrollment ratio simply means the number of students of a given age bracket, the number of children of a given age bracket, of a given age bracket, of a given age bracket. When we say age brackets here, maybe we're talking about between 6 years and 11 years. 6 years and 11 years could be a given age bracket. Now, for example, if you are teaching in a class, all the number of children in your class do not have the same age. Their age is between certain age to certain age. That is called age bracket. So the number of the enrollment ratio is the number of students of a given age bracket enrolled into a given level of education. It could be primary, it could be secondary, it could even be tertiary. At a given time, in relation to the entire population of the given age bracket in that locality. In that locality. That's assuming that in a locality we have 1,000 children. 1,000 children of ages of primary school age, and out of that number, the total population of that number that is found in school within a given time is what we call the enrollment ratio. Now, it is also usually calculated, but I may not bog your time here doing the calculation, because you will need to do some listening on the board. But just understand that this is one of the tools we use in planning education. We use it in planning education because we need to get this information to be able to know the number of children in a given area that we want to plan education for. It is a tool in planning education because we need to know the number of children in a given locality to enable us plan education for them. Why we need this information is because we will need to get the number of children in an area so that we can plan for their schools in terms of facilities, in terms of teachers, and in terms of amenities. So that's one, enrollment ratio. Then under enrollment ratio, like I told us, we have general enrollment ratio. We have age specific enrollment ratio. We have level enrollment ratio, and we have adjustment enrollment ratio. Let's take them one after the other. The general enrollment ratio can be defined as the sum total of all enrollment, the sum total of all enrollment, the sum total of all enrollments into all levels of the education system in a given year for a given school age bracket. All enrollments into all levels of education. That is when we are talking about a general here. So it will be primary, secondary, tertiary, all general. We call that general. So if we are talking about general enrollment now in Nigeria, we're talking about the total number of people that are found in school across all levels. So we use that in planning education because we need that statistics to know those who are in school and those who are not in school, and then to know how we can plan so that education should be able to accommodate the number of children who are supposed to be in school. Let's leave it at that because it requires some mathematical formula which we will need to be in the classroom to be able to explain that. But just what I want people to know here is the tools we use in planning. Then at the appropriate time, maybe when you're doing your PhD program, you can be able to do the calculations. If time also permits us, we'll still go back to class. We'll be able to also learn that. But take note that as a planner, you want to plan education for a given area. These are the tools you use in the planning process. The enrollment ratio is very important. because it helps to make us understand the number of people that are enrolled in a given program at a given period in time. Then the next one is the age-specific enrollment ratio. Age-specific enrollment ratio. Now we are all aware that in Nigeria, the policy states that any child that is of the age of 6 should be in primary school. Any child that is about the age of 6 should be in primary school. From the age of 12 and above, a child proceeds to secondary school. So when we talk about age-specific enrollment, we are looking at the specific ages that are captured in a given level of education. Say, for example, in primary school, what is the average age of number of students who are enrolled in primary 1? What is the average number of age of students who are enrolled in secondary education? What is the average number of people who are enrolled in tertiary education? So here I want to find out whether we are having overage people in school, or we have underage and all that. So we use it in planning. We use it in planning because education is age specific. Education is age specific. Those who should be in primary school, there is an age limit. Those in secondary school, there is an age limit. At least we are aware that the policy states that for you to enter into tertiary institution, you must be up to the age of 18. So we use this age-specific enrollment to determine the number of people who are found at each level of the education level. It's important in planning. Then the next tool for planning is what is called level enrollment ratio. Level enrollment ratio. Level enrollment ratio. Are you with me? Level enrollment ratio. The enrollment ratio is level specific because the calculation could be done for primary, secondary, or any type of tertiary education. Level enrollment. So the level enrollment is used to calculate the number of people who are enrolled in a particular program or at a particular level of education. Say primary, secondary, or tertiary. How many of our children are in each level of this? We will calculate that so that we also know, even from a given population, the number of people that are out of school, that should be in school. So all this is important tools in planning, because any society that fails to be able to capture all the population variable in its educational planning will be having very serious challenges, as we have it today in Nigeria. A lot of population, a lot of the age that are not in school are the ones committing the various crimes. So we need to capture all the ages into the education system, know their level of enrollment into school, even when the policy has been there that so age to so age should be in primary 1, so age to so age should be in primary 2. Then after that policy has been made, it is now for the educational planners to determine the specific number of children that are actually enrolled in school. It is important if we must understand whether we are making progress in education or not. Then the next, it also has some mathematical calculations which the time may not permit us here to do. Then we also have age-specific enrollment ratio. The last one I just mentioned is level enrollment ratio. The next is age-specific enrollment ratio. Age-specific enrollment ratio. This is used to calculate the number of students or pupils of a specific age group who are enrolled at a given education level. The age-specific enrollment ratio is used to calculate the number of students or pupils of a specific age group. Specific age group, say maybe between ages 6 and 11. Specific age group possibly say ages 6 and 11 for primary, specific age group who are enrolled at a given education level, the primary level, secondary level, or tertiary level. The age group that are enrolled in a specific education level, we use that to know, to calculate that category of students. Alright, then the next is the gender ratio, gender enrollment ratio. When we talk about gender, we talk about male and females. It shows the enrollment of girls in relation to the enrollment of boys. Gender enrollment ratio is used to calculate the enrollment of girls in relation to the enrollment of boys in the education system. We can do that for primary, we can do that for secondary, we can also do that for tertiary. It helps us to determine the number of girls that are in school. It also helps us to determine the number of boys that are in school. It helps us to determine the number of male, female that are in tertiary institution, to know which group is lacking behind and which group should be catered for, or which group that emphasis need to be placed on their education. You will recall that in some certain states right now, the enrollment of boys in school is dropping, while the enrollment of girls in school is moving ahead. Now, in a more detailed discussion, we will explain most of the reasons for this kind of situation. In most places now, the men are beginning to feel that it is a waste of time going to school, when those who went to school do not have anything to write home about. So most of them are going to learn trades and leaving education for women. So in those states, we have more women enrolling in school in a particular level of school. So that calculation is important to help us determine the number of boys that are in school in relation to the number of girls that are also in school at a given level of education. So that's what we use enrollment ratio to do in educational planning. Then the next tool of planning in education is student or pupil-teacher ratio. Students or pupil-teacher ratio. Students or pupil-teacher ratio. You are well familiar with this concept, or this term. But however, you may not know that it is used in planning. It is used in planning in education because the number of people in school determines the number of teachers that will be recruited. So that is why it's important to calculate the pupil-teacher ratio. For example, when most of you will be looking for project topics to write, it's important that these areas can also be covered in your research. The present situations in schools in Rivers State now calls for research to really determine the number of students in school against the number of teachers. Do we have sufficient teachers to handle the number of students in schools? This is a food for thought and calls for research. So that is why we calculate it, because we use it in planning. If you visit more schools today, you will discover that even the posting of teachers are lopsided in one specific area, while other areas suffer. Most schools, science teachers are not there. Most schools, English teachers are not there. Most schools, we have 10 teachers in a particular subject area. You know, and in most schools, a single teacher teaches up to 100 students. While the prescribed student-teacher ratio in the national policy says one teacher is to 35 students or thereabout for primary, and secondary one is to 40. So we use student-teacher ratio to determine the number of teachers that should be available in a given number of student population. So it's a planning tool we use in planning. There are also some mathematical calculations in it that should be reserved for classroom activity. or maybe by the time you come for your PhD class. Now we have the non-schooling gap. The non-schooling gap. The non-schooling gap is another tool we use in planning education. You need to be a little bit attentive here so that you can capture this non-schooling gap. Non-schooling gap. Are you with me? All right. The non-schooling gap shows how many potential school-age children that are not enrolled in a school in a given academic section. I take that again. The non-schooling gap shows how many potential school-age children that are not enrolled in a school in a given academic section. Potential school-age children. You know, the policy is clear on the persons that should be in school at each level. At least we know that kindergarten is from the age of 3 years, although those ones are not compulsory, but it is mandatory that as soon as a child is 6 years old, he should be in school. Now, within a locality, there are children of that specific age who are supposed to be in school that are not in school. Now, when you calculate the number of children who are supposed to be in school that are not in school in a given section, that gives us what is called the non-schooling gap. The non-schooling gap. The non-schooling gap. Let me take it again. The non-schooling gap shows how many potential school-age children that are not enrolled in a school in a given academic session. The number of children that are supposed to be in school that are not in school in a given academic section. In a given academic, maybe 2019-2020 section. Those who are supposed to be in school who are not in school. That is what is called non-schooling gap. We also calculate it and use it for planning. It gives us information on educational planning. All right. It also has some mathematical calculations which I may not bug you here, but just what I want you to get is know the tools and the purpose for which we use it in planning. Now we also have what is called flow statistics. Flow statistics in educational planning. Flow statistics in educational planning. We have flow statistics. We use it in educational planning. Flow statistics. Flow statistics help the educational planner to assess the flow or movement of pupils, including staff, into the system. Flow statistics help the educational planner to assess the flow or movement of students, including staff, into the system, through the system, and out of the system. That's how people move into and move out. How students and staff move into and move out. Are you with me? Flow statistics is another planning tool which we use to determine the flow of students and staff into and out of the education system. It has a lot of varieties. We can use. It has a lot of varieties we can use to determine it. But what I want you to understand here is just the term flow statistics. It is used to determine the number of the movement of the flow of students into and out of the system. It includes both students and staff. They move in and move out of the system. For example, the number of students that are admitted into a program at a given level, say for example, in a given year, 2020, the number of students that came in that were admitted into a program. At the end of the section, how many of them are still there? How many of them dropped out? And a lot of factors can affect dropout. You know, so how many were able to continue with the program to the next level? How many of them were able to complete the program? If it's a 4-year program, a 6-year program, at the inception 2020 to 2026, for example, in primary schools, how many of, assuming 1,000 students were admitted in 2020? That's the flow, inflow. Then by 2026, we now calculate how many of them that were able to complete that cycle. So that's what we mean by flow. Then we also calculate the dropout from the intake. What is the dropout rate? Those who are dropping out of the program. A lot of factors can affect dropout. Death is one of them. Handicap is one of them. Sickness is one of them. We calculate all that, and then know the number that concludes the program. The same thing also happens in terms of staff. We know the number of staffs that we have in the system that flow into the system. How many of them are retained? How many of them leave the system? All that is calculated. We use it to know what is called teacher retention or staff retention. We also use it to know what is called staff attrition. We use it to calculate staff retention and use it to calculate staff attrition. Retention is the number of teachers who are willing to stay in the system, while attrition is the number of teachers who leave the system as a result of one thing or the other. It could be maybe they get a better job, maybe because of the poor conditions of service, could be even as a result of death and all that. You know, so we calculate all that. We use it in planning. All right. Then other indicators that we also use in planning, I've just mentioned them. Then what is called entry rates. The rate of entry. The rate of entry is calculated to know the percentage of entry, or to know the rate at which people are entering into the school. To know the rate, the progression rate, entry rate, progression rate, retention rate. I don't know whether I'm becoming very fast. All right. So after the flow statistics, we have other indicators we use in planning. They include entry rates, progression rates, retention rates, literacy rates, promotion rates, repetition rates, dropout rates, and transition rates. Let me take them again. We have entry rates, progression rates, retention rates, literacy rates, promotion rates, repetition rates, dropout rates, and transition rates. Now, each of these categories of tools have a mathematical formula. Sometimes most people run away from planning because they feel that it has mathematics, but there are small mathematics that anybody, even the market women, can calculate. So let's look at the entry rates. But at this point, I'm not bugging you with the mathematical calculations. That maybe will be done later, like I've said earlier. You know. So entry rate, the rate at which people enter into a given program or specific program, the entry rate. For example, have the primary schools, the entry rate, the number of people that come for admission at that level. We calculate it. We calculate for secondary, we also calculate for tertiary. The rate at which people ask for admission and are admitted. Then we have progression rates. Progression rate is the rate at which people progress from one level to the next. Progress from primary 1 to primary 2, primary 2 to primary 3 in that order, and even progress from secondary to primary to secondary, and from secondary to the tertiary. All that is calculated. We calculate it, we use it for planning. So you can see that the tools we use in planning, they are so numerous. They are so numerous that the educational planner must be at home with them and know what to use them for. Ordinarily before now, even while you have been teaching, you have had these terms before, but you do not know that there are terms we use in planning and the way we use them for planning. Now the next one is the progression rate. I've said it. Progression rate is the movement, how we progress, how children progress from one level to the next in the educational pursuit. Then the next is retention rate. Retention rate, the number of people that are retained in a given program over a given period of time. The number of people that are retained in a given program over a given period of time. Then we have the literacy rate. The literacy rate is another important tool we use in planning education. Even nationally and internationally, this rate is known, is applied. At the international fora, the literacy rate is calculated to know the literacy rate at the international level, and it is also used country-wise, country by country, to know their literacy rate. It is also used in sub-region, for example, sub-Saharan region, the literacy rate in that area. It is also used by country, the literacy rate of a particular country. The case of Nigeria, we say it is between about 50 or thereabouts. Some advanced countries, their literacy rate has reached up to 70 something. So we use it to know the level of people who are literate in a given country. So we also use it to calculate in educational planning. It is, if you can also bring it down even to community level or town level. A particular community, you calculate their literacy rate. Particular state, you calculate their literacy rate. So we use it to know those who are educationally backward and how to plan education for them. So it's a very important indicator of educational development and even national development. Literacy rate is a very important indicator of national development and educational development of a given country. Then we have promotion, repetition, and dropout. Promotion is the number of people who move from one level to the other, who are promoted to progress to the next level. We also calculate it. At least you're very familiar with that because you're involved in promotion exercises in your various schools. Then we have repetition, those who are repeating a particular class or level due to one reason or the other, either due to failure or due to whatever. We calculate all that so that we know. We calculate so that we can make provision for them. We calculate so that we can be able to provide for them. If you don't have all that, the equipments, infrastructure that they need will not be provided. So we plan. We get this information so that we can use it to plan and accommodate people. They will have dropout rates. Dropout are the number of people that drop out of the program in a given year. The number of people that are leaving the program, are dropping out of the program, who don't complete. You are aware that in the society today there are a lot of dropouts, the people who are leaving school without completing a given level of education or a given type of education. All that is called dropout. We calculate that number and use it in planning. Then transition rate. Transition and progression rates appear to look alike, but they are not the same. Progress is the level of progress a child makes at a given level, maybe primary school, the progress from one level to the other. But transition, you are transiting from one level to the next level. Say, for example, primary school, you transit from primary to secondary, you transit from secondary to tertiary. So we calculate it to know the number of those who finish primary school that are able to gain admission into secondary education. We also calculate the number of those who are able to conclude their secondary education, who are transiting to tertiary institution. All these are important variables in educational planning that you need to be aware of. All these are captured in our book from pages 164 to page 1 185 of the book. Now, apart from these rates, which we use in planning education, there are also other tools we use in planning that we call data. We call them statistical data for educational planning. Statistical data for educational planning. Statistical data for educational planning. The other ones we discussed, we call them rates, Roman rate, Roman ratio, and all that. This one we're talking about statistical data that the educational planner needs in planning education. Why you need all these details and why you need this information? Because as educational planner, you will know exactly what is required in the planning of education. Assuming you were called upon to plan education for a given locality, say for example maybe your community, say for example your local government, or even your state. Those are the things you will look for. Educational planning is not something that is done without using tools. So these are the things you are called upon. These are the things you will use in the planning process. They are the required information you need to really plan. So in the area of data, we have types of data. Basically, there are two types of data we use in planning. There are basically two types of data we use in planning. The one is called, take that again. Statistical data is also another tool we use in educational planning. Data is another tool we use in educational planning. Basically, there are two types of data we use in planning. One, quantitative data. Two, qualitative data. One, quantitative data. Two, qualitative data. Is that taken? All right. Qualitative data are broad, non-tangible, and not easily quantifiable information. Qualitative data are non-tangible and not easily quantifiable information we need in planning. They are non-tangible, not easily quantifiable information we need in planning. For example, the policies on education, educational policies, they are non-tangible and they are not quantifiable. We need the guidelines on education. We need all those. All those ones are called qualitative information, qualitative data. We need them in the planning process. All those ones that cannot be quantified in numbers, they are non-tangible. We call them qualitative data. We need them for planning. Then secondly, the quantitative data. The quantitative data are measurable documents or information we need in the planning process. Then examples of them include, let me take that again. Quantitative data are measurable information that we can calculate their numbers. They are tangible information that we can calculate their numbers and use them in planning process. The examples include population data. The examples include population data, schools population, staff population, students population, facilities, financial resources, school access and liability. school access and liability. Let me take them again. The population data, population information, schools information, staff information, students and pupils information, facilities, financial resources, school assets and liabilities. These are examples of quantitative data we use in the planning process. Now, how do we use them in planning process? And that is the crux of this our course, social context of educational planning. Here we are talking about groups, population. I told us earlier, social context means the groupings of people in a given society, the population of people and their distribution in a given society. Here now is the crux of the matter. No, we need this information about the population of a given country, of a given area, of a given locality. We need information about their population and how this population is distributed to enable us plan for those who are supposed to be in school. For example, in a community where the population, majority of the population is between 6 years and 25 years, you should know that these are school age children that should be at one level of education or the other, and they must be planned for. So if you don't have the statistical information about their distribution, how will you be able to plan? So we need this information, where they are located, how they are distributed, to enable us plan on school location to capture those areas. For example, if in a given locality majority of the children are found within the ages of 16 to 12, it means that the focus there should be on primary schools. It also means that while we are planning for primary school, we should also begin to plan for their secondary education, because as they finish primary, they will transit to the next education level. So you see why we need the population information to be able to plan. Then we also need information about schools. We need information about schools. Where are the schools located? What will inform the decision to site a school in a particular area? The number of schools available against the population. We need all that. If you do not know the number of schools that you have in your locality, you cannot be able to plan for that, for the number of children in that area to go to school. So we need all that. We need to have information about staff that are posted in a school. We use the number of population to determine the number of staff that should be needed in a particular school. We also calculate students and pupils. We need information about them. We use it for planning. We need to know about their age. We need to know about their sex, like I said earlier, about their sex. We need to even know about their background, their socioeconomic background. We need all that information. We need it for planning. So we also need information about facilities, so that we'll be able to know the number of facilities to distribute and how to locate them in schools. So the number of students in a school will determine the number of facilities that will be given. So we need all that. If we don't have that information, it becomes difficult to plan. Then we need also information about finance and the financial resources. We need information on that, so that we'll be able to plan, because without finance, not all the plan will come to nothing. We need to calculate the income, the revenue, the sources, who should pay for education, which level should be free, which level should be taken care by government, what is the percentage that federal government should contribute to education, state government, local government, what should parents do, and all that. So all that is monitoring. So we need to calculate the financial involvement in educational provision as planners. If you don't do that, of course, remember they say those who fail to plan have already planned to fail. So if we don't do all that financial calculations, it will become very, very difficult for us to achieve the aims of goals of education. Perhaps that might be the reason why we are not making any headway yet, because when we look at the magnitude of the enormity of responsibilities we have and the financial resources allocated, they are nowhere to be compared, possibly because of poor planning. So it behoves on educational planners to be actually to get the correct information, so that we calculate the monetary value to use for it. You cannot have 3 children in school where the school fees is maybe 3 children where the school fees is 25,000. You should be paying 75,000, and you're making a budget of 50,000 for their school fees. It can't work. So we need this financial information to enable us plan on what to be provided in schools. They are important tools. We also need to get information about the school assets and liabilities. We need that because we also need to calculate and use them for planning. So I think we need information on staff data. Information concerning staff. Here, I'm not talking of the number of staff required. I'm not talking of the number of staff required against student. No, we need information about staff, specific information about staff that has to do with one, their age, because we check the age of their retirement, point of entry to point of retirement. So we need their age. We need their experience. How many years experience? We need their quality, their qualification, the qualification they hold. Most people have NCE, some hold B.Ed, some are non-teaching staff, some also do not hold teaching qualification. We need all that information. We use it for planning. So you can see that the task of the educational planner is enormous, and the tools we use in planning is also enormous. So the planner will need all this information and know exactly what each tool is used for. Now, having said that, we have just mentioned all the tools that we need in the educational planning process. Now, as educational planners, it is not easy to usually access this information and use them in planning. So that brings us to the next subhead of this topic: the challenges in getting accurate data. The challenges in getting accurate data for educational planning process. The challenges we have as planners in getting this information we need, or getting these tools we need in planning. These challenges include but not limited to the following. The challenges include but not limited to the following. 1. Data bank issues. Data bank issues. 2. Falsification of records. 3. Secrecy and suspicion. 4. Low value system. 5. Insufficient funding of the education system. 6. Educational planners versus educational practitioners. The problem of educational planners versus educational practitioners. Let me explain them one after the other. I think with that, by the time I conclude this explanation, we would have ended this lecture. Data bank issues. Now, in most developed countries of the world, they have a data bank where every relevant information concerning education is kept. Now, when the planner needs any information for planning, he goes to the data bank. and it gets all the information. But here in Nigeria, data bank is not available. They are not available. And because they are not available, even the research student finds it difficult to get most useful information. And sometimes even the ones you get are not corroborated. A student will get on a particular issue, we can have 2-3 data from different sources. So it makes it very unreliable. But in most other countries, you get the same data. Wherever you check, it's the same information because they have a data bank where that relevant information is kept and stored. So this makes it difficult for us to plan. A situation where you want to plan and information you are getting or the data you are getting is far below the real information on ground. So you will plan based on what you have, and when you plan, you see that it's quite off the mark. So that will affect goal achievement. So the next is falsification of records, even where there is no bank data. Most of the information again available are falsified, which makes it difficult for planning. For example, information concerning students enrollment are falsified. Information concerning staff enrollment falsified in most cases. And when this information are falsified, the educational planner finds it difficult to plan accurately. So you see this challenge. You are asked to plan for the number of teachers that are needed, and they have already bloated the number of students in schools, possibly to attract more teachers. And then when you use that information to plan, you get the decisions reached will be wrong. They will have suspicion and secrecy. In the country today, at the most areas, most of this information are kept as top secret. So when you need them for planning, they hardly give them out. And then bureaucratic bottleneck. You want information, you have to apply. You apply, you wait for bureaucratic approvals and all that. All that will delay planning. And then most of the times you are being suspected that the information you need, you might use it for something that will indict them. So they may not give you the correct information. So these are the major challenges that the educational planners face in using these statistics for planning. They will have no value system. Most of the things that we need, that we place value on, that we need to plan, people don't take them serious. They don't take them serious because of our low value and low preferences. Certain details we need, people just play with it. After all, what is essence is this and all that, but they're important. So for that reason, it's also difficult and challenging for the educational planner to carry out its responsibilities. Then we have insufficient funding. Of course, even when you have the accurate data and you have all the necessary things you need, assuming they are accurate, you need the fund. For example, if you had calculated that it will take on the average a minimum of say 10,000 naira to take care of a child's feeding in a month, let's take with this their feeding program, the educational planner calculates the average 10,000 will take care of a child, at a price of maybe 200 naira per day in a month. And when fund is released, they release fund to the tune of 50 naira per day per child. So how can that? It can't work. So that's why funding plays a role. So that's why you see most of the schools are underfunded. Most of the facilities are shabby provided because fund is not made available in commensurate with the data available. A school where 5 English teachers are needed, because of funding they recruit only 2. You can see what the result will take. So funding is very, very important. Schools will need laboratory, school will need equipments and all that. If the funds are not made available, it becomes difficult to achieve, and it's a Herculean task for the educational planner. So these are the. Then we have finally the challenge of educational planner versus educational planning practitioners. The educational planner is the man who is trained, like you have all been trained now, in the process, in the act of planning. You are that's an area, a specialized area that you are being trained for. You know, but in practice, if you go to most ministries, you will see that those who are involved in the planning, are those who studied sociology, history, and what have you. They are drafted into the planning. If you go to the Ministry of Education, you see the planning unit. Get the statistics of those who are there. They are not people who are specialized in that area. We call them educational planning practitioners. So when the educational planners are not used in the planning process, the details of what ought to be done will be missing. So they will not have the required skill to do the planning. So that's a major challenge. Even in most educational institutions, those who are hired or placed in position of planning are not those who have the relevant qualification in that area. So in that case, planning becomes challenging. So these are the challenges faced by the educational planner. So even when the information we need for planning is available, the planning practice itself has some defaults due to the use of non-planners in the planning process. On this note, my students, I think we will end today's class here. By our next class, we will also be talking on other issues. I think by next class we'll be looking at sociological perspectives of education. Our next class we'll be looking at sociological perspectives of education. Please take note of that. Our next class we'll be looking at sociological perspectives of education. Now, what we have done so far, what you will do now is, having listened to this lecture, there are questions you need to ask. There are questions or things that you didn't get properly that need to be re-explained. You ask the questions on your WhatsApp page. I also belong there. Ask the questions. I will respond to each of the questions on your WhatsApp page, so that all of us will be on the page. This video is necessary so that those who will not be able to listen to it at any at a given point in time can always play it and listen to the class, to the lecture. So that is why I took this option. As time progresses, if there is need to alter the options used, we will do that as we progresses and make amendment and make changes on how lectures can be delivered. On that note, I wish you safe stay at home. Please stay safe. Your family, your children, your loved ones, stay safe so that this period will come to pass and we'll reunite again in the class. I look forward to seeing all of us alive after the virus. Thank you and God bless you.